Hello, and welcome to Nursing Research Tips, a show dedicated to sharing best practices, tips, and other resources within the areas of nursing research and evidence-based practice. I'm your host, Jenny Barrow, Associate Professor of Undergraduate Nursing, who specializes in teaching students real-world content to help transform their future nursing practice. I enjoy taking the boring world of research and evidence-based practice and making it come alive for my students, and that's what I intend to do with this podcast. Welcome back to Nursing Research Tips. I'm so glad you're here for episode 3, where we're going to dive into something every nurse interacts with, quality improvement, or QI for short. Let's start with the basics. What is QI? Quality improvement is all about making systems better, not someday, but today. It's a practical, on-the-ground approach to improving patient care by using local data, team-driven insights, and small, manageable changes. Unlike research, which seeks to generate new knowledge, or evidence-based practice, which applies the best available evidence, QI is about fixing problems in your current practice using the information you already have access to. Most QI projects follow a simple method like plan, do, study, act, or PDSA. That involves planning a change, then doing it on a small scale, such as a pilot study, then study the results, and then act by adjusting and scaling up if it works. Here's a real-world example. Let's say your unit tracks an increase in patient falls during shift change times. Instead of launching a big research study, your team uses internal data to dig into the issue further. You notice that falls happen most often during that 30-minute overlap when both shifts are focused on handoff. So you test a small change, assigning one nurse as a dedicated float during shift change. Their job is to check on high-risk patients and cover the floor. You track whether fall rates go down during that time window over a few weeks. If they do, awesome. You keep going. You refine the plan and you maybe spread it to other shifts. That's quality improvement in action. It's flexible, fast, and designed to respond to your practice environment. And the best part, you don't have to be a researcher to do it. You just need to be observant, collaborative, and open to trying something new. Now that we've grounded ourselves in what QI is, let's talk about how it compares to nursing research and evidence-based practice, two concepts we covered in earlier episodes. If you didn't listen to those earlier episodes, I highly recommend that you do that soon. To recap those earlier episode discussions, I want to remind my listeners that it's easy to confuse research, EBP, and QI because they all aim to improve patient outcomes. But here's the thing, they serve different purposes, and understanding the differences helps us apply the right approach at the right time. Let's walk through an example using central line associated bloodstream infections, or CLABSIs for short. Nursing research is about asking and answering questions we don't yet have the evidence for. It often involves rigorous study designs, detailed data collection, and importantly, Institutional Review Board, or IRB, oversight. If you were doing research, your question might sound something like, does a new type of antimicrobial central line dressing reduce CLABSI rates compared to the standard dressing? That question explores something new. So you would run a controlled study to find the answer. That's nursing research. Now, evidence-based practice uses existing research to improve decision-making. Here you might ask, what do recent studies and guidelines recommend as the most effective dressing change protocols for reducing CLABSIs? You would search the literature, review clinical practice guidelines, weigh the evidence against staff expertise and patient preferences, and then recommend the best available strategy. That's evidence-based practice. Quality improvement, on the other hand, is hyper-focused on your local setting. You already know there's a problem. Your CLABSI rate is higher than the benchmark, perhaps, and you want to fix it. So your QI question might be, Will assigning a CLABSI champion to do weekly chart audits improve compliance with our central line bundle? You try a change, you measure the outcome using your own unit's data, tweak the process, and then repeat as needed. That's quality improvement. Here's how I like to sum it up, and you may have heard this in the last video I did. Research creates new knowledge. Evidence-based practice applies existing knowledge, and quality improvement seeks to improve systems. Each definitely has its place, and when we understand the differences, we can ask sharper questions, follow the right processes, and avoid blurring the lines that can sometimes lead to ethical missteps or inefficient outcomes. Now let's bring all this talk about quality improvement into the real world. What does QI actually look like in practice? To understand the answer to that question, let's first add a bit more discussion about one of the most commonly used tools in QI, the PDSA cycle, short for Plan, Do, Study, and Act. We talked about this very briefly earlier in this episode, but we didn't get too deep into it. This cycle is at the heart of many quality initiatives. It's a simple, structured process for testing a change in practice, seeing how it works, and adjusting based on what you learn. It's called a cycle for a reason, and that's because it's ongoing. The goal is continuous improvement, not a one-time fix. Let's break that down a bit more. The first step is plan. You identify a problem, like rising fall rates during shift change, and you come up with a small testable change. Maybe your team wants to implement a designated handoff buddy system where one nurse stays with high-risk patients while another gives report. Secondly is do. You roll it out on one of your units or on one shift. It's a trial or a pilot test. Very low stakes just to see what happens. After you do that comes the study. You gather feedback. Did the fall rates change? Did the staff like the buddy system? Did it cause any unexpected issues? The final step in this cycle is act. Based on what you learned, you adjust. Maybe the system worked really well, but only on the day shift, so you tweak it and you start another cycle. Over time, this process moves you closer and closer to best practice. And when things change, because in healthcare it always does, you start the cycle again. That's the power of quality improvement. It's adaptable, practical, and it's always in motion. Now let's look at a few real-life examples of QI in action. First, reducing catheter-associated UTIs. Say a team notices high infection rates tied to indwelling catheters. They plan to test a nurse-led protocol for timely removal. They do it on one medical surgical unit. They study infection rates and feedback. Then they act, adjusting their process and expanding it hospital-wide if it was successful. Another example of the PDSA cycle lies in the area of improving discharge instructions. Let's say our patients are going home confused. A QI team would plan to implement a teach-back approach. They pilot it, they study how well patients recall the information, and then they can adjust the scripts or workflows accordingly. And then another cycle would begin. Here's the big takeaway. Quality improvement does not just live in the boardrooms. It lives in the break room, the nurse's station, and at the bedside. And it's not reserved for just managers or committees. Any nurse, including you, can identify a problem, help plan a change, and contribute to meaningful, measurable improvement. So the next time something at work makes you think, there has to be a better way, you're probably standing at the starting line of your next PDSA cycle. Okay, so you're starting to think, maybe I could see myself getting involved in quality improvement. But how do you actually take that first step? Let's keep it simple. Here are 3 quick, doable ways to jump right into QI. First, you can join a QI committee or a task force. Most units or hospitals have groups working on things like fall prevention, infection prevention, patient satisfaction, you name it. These teams are always looking for fresh eyes and motivated staff. You don't have to be an expert, just showing up and asking questions is a great place to start. Second, the next time you're in a staff meeting, bring ideas forward. Maybe something is not working as well as it could, like report handoffs, stocking equipment, discharge planning. Suggest trying out a solution using the PDSA cycle. Frame it as a small pilot test, not a major overhaul, that makes it less intimidating and more likely to gain support from your colleagues. Finally, start getting in the habit of asking, is there a better way to do this? And more importantly, how would we know if it's better? That mindset, questioning the status quo and seeking data to drive decisions, is at the heart of quality improvement. And remember, QI is not about perfection. It's about progress. And it works best when everyone, from the new graduate to seasoned charge nurse, gets involved. As we begin to close this episode, the ball is now in your court. I encourage all of my listeners to reflect on one or more inefficiencies or issues in your current workplace. Ask yourself, could this be a prime target for a QI opportunity? We can't be effective in our roles as nurses if we're complacent and we're happy camping out in the status quo. If you like the content contained within this episode, I encourage you to subscribe or follow this show within your favorite podcast platform. Following the show is the best way to be notified when I release new episodes. In addition, make sure you stay tuned for the next episode that is going to bring us back to the basics with a deep dive into quantitative versus qualitative research and why both matter for your practice.